Hello, higurashi again. It's time. Continue. Starting to get pretty spooky now. Last time, Rena, she was so scary. She scared me so badly. Oh my goodness. See what happens now. Weariness and a headache. Not a very nice way to start the day.
どうしたの？ケイチ、今朝は顔色悪いわよ。昨夜は何時に寝たの？
It seemed that my mom had noticed my sullen state. Yesterday, I kept on waking up in the middle of the night. Without a doubt, I felt a presence. I felt the presence of someone standing in front of my door. I told myself repeatedly that it was my imagination and forced myself to try and sleep. Except, not being able to stand it, I gathered up my courage and opened the door. Of course, there wasn't anyone there. I think I did this 3 times throughout the night. Or maybe I just didn't remember doing it any more than that. Even though I was able to get to the breakfast table without incident, I still didn't feel at ease.
風邪かもしれない。なんだか食欲ないんだ。
あら、ちょっと熱あるんじゃない？どうする？学校行ける？
Technically, I did go to a school, but it was mostly self-study. It wouldn't matter much if I missed a day, would it? It could have been that I hadn't been feeling well for the last few days because I really did have a cold. If I took some medicine and got a good day of rest, I might be able to greet everyone with a smile tomorrow. Yeah. Startled, I looked back and forth between the entrance and the clock. It was 10 minutes later than when I usually met up with Dena. It was Dena.
レナちゃん迎えに来ちゃったけど、どうする？
Dena.
お休みする？
Dena was a good girl. She might be somewhat quirky, but she was certainly cute. The lunches she made were delicious, and she always looked out for me. Why should I be so scared of something like that? It wasn't Dena's fault. It was probably mine. It had to have been my cold. It just had to be.
休む。ごめん。
じゃあ、母さんが断ってきてあげるわね。
Mom headed off to the door. I would have to pass by the entrance to get back to my room. I didn't have the nerve to meet with Dena, so I wrapped myself in a blanket on the sofa and closed my eyes. I was so sleep-deprived, I quickly fell into a deep slumber. I'd only intended to lie down for a bit, but it was almost noon when I woke up. I called out to my parents, but they didn't seem to be around. On the table, I found lunch prepared and a note. Mom and Dad had apparently driven off to somewhere far away. It likely had to do with Dad's work. This happened every so often, so it wasn't that unusual. They would be back for dinner, but might be a bit late. On the note, it said, "The insurance card is in the cabinet. Take it and go to the hospital." There's also a well-drawn map to the hospital. That's right. I hadn't been there before, so I didn't know exactly where it was. I had a light lunch, although it really was just leftovers from the morning, and, just in case, went to the hospital. Normally I'd never be here, in the middle of a weekday. Just walking around like this had me feeling guilty. It was an odd feeling. Following my mom's map, I took a road I usually never used. After walking for a bit, the hospital sign came into view. Irie Clinic was written rather stylishly on the sign. The clinic wasn't very big, but based on the scale of the rest of Hinamizawa, it was far too grand. There was a parking lot and even a reserved spot for buses. They must be making a mint. I spaced out in the air-conditioned waiting room until it was my turn to be seen.
前原さん、 診察室へどうぞ。
Little crocodile. It's cute. After half-heartedly answering all the chatty doctor's questions, he responded with the old, "It's probably a cold." They gave me a shot and 3 days' worth of medicine. I thought it was a little overboard, but if it would clear away the gloomy feeling I'd been having lately, then it was worth it. What kind of shot did he get? I settled the bill and took a quick trip to the washroom. As I was leaving, I overheard a conversation between some elderly people who seemed to regulars at the clinic. Of course, I had no intention of eavesdropping, if it just wasn't for that word. Ugh.
やっぱり鬼隠しかいね。
どうかね。まだまだ若い子だけゃ。駆け落ちかもしられへん。どこの誰とよ。季節のたびに東京もんが来ちょったろ。でっけえカメラ持った若者が。あれと仲が良きゃったって話。知られへんの？
Were they talking about Tomitake-san? I could feel my ears perking up.
そら知らんけど。でも、普通駆け落ちっても仁義あるだろう。書き置きとか辞表とか書かんかいね。
すったらんかかんから駆け落ち言うんね。わきゃ看護師さんの顔見られんようなるわ。
高野さんはしっかり者よ。どこへ行ってもやっていけろん。
So her name was Takano-san? That woman with Tomitake-san. And she worked at this clinic? Oyashiro-sama's shadow was following me everywhere I went. I started listening more closely, but they began talking about fishing and it didn't seem like they were going to revisit the topic. I gave up and left. Thus, even though I was separated from the daily monotony of school, I wasn't able to escape from Oyashiro-sama's shadow. But of course, Oyashiro-sama was the guardian deity of this place, of Hinamizawa. As long as I was in Hinamizawa, I wouldn't be able to escape. Is it deity or deity? Oh, let me consult the internet really quickly. Deity? Let's see.
Deity.
Deity. Okay. Deity. Maybe it was because I was walking outside, but my appetite had suddenly returned. I might as well buy a snack with the change from the examination fee on the way home. Contemplating that, I turned onto a familiar street. At that moment, I heard a car horn abruptly honk behind me. Was I really walking so far into the middle of the road where I'd be in a car's way? I moved farther off to the side, but the horn was still honking at me. I turned around, peeved. It was Oishi-san. He stepped out of his car, AC on full blast, and waved at me.
今日はどうしたんです？学校はお休みですか？
ちょっと体調悪かったんで、今日は休みました。お昼を買って帰ろうとしてたところです。
そりゃよかった。実は私、お昼に行こうとしてたんですよ。よかったらご一緒にいかがです？お体に触るようでしたら構いませんよ。
I was just going to lie down after going home anyway, and I didn't really have a cold.
地元の食堂だと嫌でしょう。町まで行きましょう。ちょっと走りますがよろしいですかな？私、おいしいお店知ってるんですよ。
I'd finally begun to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying things. He probably wanted to talk to me about stuff that would be difficult to discuss while in Hinamizawa. It's a little bit shady. I went with Oishi-san riding in his frigid car. It was almost as if the bright sunlight outside was a lie.
ゆうべは遅くまですみませんでしたね。ご家族に送られませんでした。
Yeah.
いえ。
No, but then I was eavesdropping. Oishi-san. Oishi's name sounds like delicious in Japanese. It's similar, yeah. Except he has like the double vowels at the front, and then Oishi has the double vowel at the end, but they're similar. Oishi. Oishi. I recalled Dena, who had been listening to the phone conversation all that time, separated from me by just the door. Ugh. Even now, in the brightness of the sunlight, the thought still creeped me out. With a big bump that jolted the car, the road connecting to the city changed from dirt to pavement. My head swiveled back with a sudden realization. That's right. This is where Tomitake-san died.
富武さんの捜査は暗礁に乗り上げています。
Oishi-san spoke while peering at me from the corner of his eye.
自分の爪で喉をかき破るという異常さから幻覚作用のある何らかの薬物によるものだと信じているのですが、
まあ、
こういう症状、それも急激に引き起こす薬物はなかなかないらしいんです。もちろん検視解剖もそれを念頭に置いて十分に行ったのですが、手がかりはやはりありませんでした。
漫画なんかによくあるじゃないですか。体内に取り込まれると分解したりして。
ありますよ。演歌作詞何でしたっけ。まあ、結構あります。でもですね、富武さんのような症状を引き起こす薬物にはそういうものはないそうなんですよ。
じゃあ警察は富武さんはたたりで死んだってそう言うんですか？
I couldn't help but feel that the police were worthless. Police. I just wanted the idea of a curse to be disassociated from Tomitake-san's mysterious death.
悔しいですが、今のところは。ですが、死因はともかく、死ぬ前に何人かの人間に囲まれて暴行を受けたことだけは間違いありません。たたりでなく、人間が事件に関わっているのは疑いようがありませんよ。
That made me feel a bit relieved. We passed in front of the rather desolate, but still busier than Hinamizawa, train station. The car pulled into a restaurant parking lot, and I followed Oishi-san into the shop. It was pretty crowded, but there were only adults at this hour. Of course, there wouldn't be children in here in the middle of a weekday.
2名です。タバコは、我慢します。
こちらへどうぞ。ご注文がお決まりになりましたらお呼びください。
We were led by a peculiarly dressed waitress to our table. I sat with Oishi-san in the booth.
どうです？このお店のウェイトレスさんの格好、可愛らしいと思いません？
まあどうでしょうね。
このお店に
I guess.
いつも大人気なんですよ。お料理よりもウェイトレスさんがね。
ああ、大石さん、目がやらしいですよ。
そうですか？
Ugh. Oh, cute. Regardless of how the waitresses looked, the food was decent enough. Dessert menu. It's there. Ichigo shortcake, strawberry shortcake, chocolate cake, chocolate cake, choco, chiffon? Chiffon? Oh, is that a chiffon? Tiramisu? Wow. Man, I want to get desserts. Finishing our meals while talking about some inane topic, Oishi-san's after-meal cup of coffee arrived at the table.
昨日、ひなみ沢の昔話が出ましたよね。
ええ、人食い鬼の里だって言われてたって話でしたっけ？
私もあんまり詳しい方じゃないので、うちのばあ様に今朝ちょっと聞いてみたんです。
Oishi-san took out the notepad that was stuffed into his breast pocket.
なんでもですね、大昔はひなみ沢は鬼ヶ淵って呼ばれてたんだそうです。
鬼ヶ淵、すごい名前ですね。
今でもその名前残ってるんですよ。神主の妻が受水自殺した沼の名前は 今でも鬼ヶ淵というんです。沼の底の底は鬼たちの住む国とつながってると言われてたんだそうです。
Of course, nobody had told me anything about such an ominous swamp.
でですね、鬼ヶ淵は恐れられていたと同時に崇められてもいたんだそうです。
A respect born of fear. I guess you could say it was a kind of deification. A village of inhumane creatures.
鬼たちはある種の仙人でもあったらしいんですよ。例えば不治の病にかかった村人を鬼ヶ淵に運んで治してもらったりとかしたんだそうです。
Even if we were calling them demons, Tengu, long-nosed goblins, or Sennin would be a more apt description.
鬼って言ってもそんなに悪い人たちじゃないみたいですね。
でもそこはやっぱり人食い鬼らしいんです。ばあ様に聞いた昔話ではですね、息子を治療してもらった代償として連れてきた母親を食わせろとこうなるらしいんですよ。
息子を治療してもらった対価が自分ですか？それは怖いな。
もちろん母親は息子を連れて逃げます。これをですね、鬼ヶ淵に住む村人鬼たちがですね、全員で追いかけて取り囲んで捕まえたんだそうです。
The entire village, apparently. That's quite a frightening thing to imagine.
結局母親も息子も捕まって食べられちゃったんだそうです。おしまい。
その話矛盾がありますよ。当事者の2人が食べられちゃったんですから、その話が残るはずがありません。
ありゃ昔話はこういうの多いですよね。
He's right, though. In contrast to the ghastly tale, Oishi-san laughed heartily while sipping his coffee.
でもですね、他の昔話にも結構あるらしいんですよ。鬼ヶ淵の鬼たちが総出で獲物を捕まえに来るというのは。
I recalled that Mion said all the villagers united and fought against the dam construction. I saw similarities with how that part about the unification overlapped.
鬼たちの獲物は常に一人で、しかも前もって決められているらしいんです。
え？
That caught my attention. Oishi-san also appeared to be pondering what it meant.
ばあ様が言うにはですね、鬼の狩りの時には絶対に邪魔をしてはいけない。家に閉じこもって布団をかぶってろって言うんです。
つまりどういうことですか？
獲物の人を助けたりかくまったりしてはいけないんだそうです。鬼の狩りを邪魔しない限り村人には危害を加えない、そういうルールなんだそうです。
Basically, don't help the victims. Pretend you didn't see the atrocities. In other words,
ルールを破ったらどうなるんです？
さあ、何しろ人食い鬼ですからね。
hello. Many parts of that tale caught my attention. What horrors will we witness today? Who knows, man? Parts of the story he told me overlapped with his theory that the entire village was in on the crime. Even if it wasn't the whole village, it was conceivable that the villagers were hiding under the covers and leaving them to die when there's a group that was on the hunt, wasn't it? I didn't dare speak it.
じゃあ大石さんはやっぱり村ぐるみもしくは村人数人の犯行だと見てるんですね。
前原さんはどう思います？ああ、すみません。コーヒーのおかわりいいですか？
That's what I wanted to know. It seemed that we were both waiting for the other to say that last part. He waited for the waitress to finish pouring coffee before speaking.
去年サトシ君が失踪した頃から
Spooky
私
music
は不
is
審に
back.
感じていたんです。
Oishi-san muttered as he watched the milk swirl around in his coffee.
それでサトシさんのお友達、つまり前原さんのお友達グループの皆さんをちょっぴりだけ、本当にちょっぴりだけですよ、調べさせてもらったんです。
If Oishi had said this to me before, I would have gotten angry at him for calling my friends into question. but as I was now, I couldn't.
とてもつまらない話になります。前原さんがつまらないと感じたらいつでもおっしゃってください。終わりにしますので。
Oishi-san was wearing the most serious expression that I'd ever seen from him. It was as if he was telling me to prepare myself and listen. There are quite a few things I regretted hearing from Oishi-san, but none of them were as threatening as this. A little voice inside me was screaming like an alarm. Stop, Keiichi. This was probably the last one. I took a deep breath and silenced that voice. I would not run from the truth.
お願いします。
That was all I could utter. Oishi-san stared into my eyes silently for a few moments. After he was certain I was ready, he began.
1年目の事件の被害者は現場の監督さんだったんですが、何度か。
Oishi-san had said before that Mion had defied the dam project vehemently. Well, it wasn't hard to imagine how she'd be if she got worked up.
2年目の事件で誘致派の夫婦が事故に遭いましたよね。現場にはお嬢さんも一緒にいたんです。それが北条聡子さんなんです。
わあ。
え？
Satoko?
サトコってサトコ？
Oishi-san's look told me that my voice was too loud. I realized it as well and quickly quieted down.
3年目には神主夫婦が亡くなられますよね。そのお嬢さんが古田理香さんです。
リカちゃんが
4年目に亡くなった主婦はもうわかりますね。北条聡子さんの義理のおばです。当時は聡子さんはご両親を事故で失っていましたので預けられていたのです。被害者宅に。
I could tell my lips were getting dry. I didn't even have the wits to keep my mouth from hanging agape. I thought it was nothing but a bizarre incident, one that I could easily distance myself from. But clicking and clacking, it had snuck all the way to my feet.
ちなみに4年目に失踪した北条聡さんは聡子さんの実の兄になります。
ちょっと待ってください。
It took everything I had to finally say that. I gulped down a glass of water and once again wiped my face with a napkin. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. But Oishi-san was relentless. Instead of waiting for me to finish sorting out my feelings, he started speaking again. The last of the things I shouldn't have heard.
被害者たちはなぜかあなたのお友達グループに全てつながるんです。
偶然に決まってるじゃないですか。
前原さん、静かに静かに。みんな見てますよ。
Mion? Satoko? Rika-chan? So what if they're connected? You're telling me all of my friends? It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. Oh, Rena is different, isn't she? Rena isn't connected with the victims at all.
竜宮レナさんは去年まで茨城の郊外にお住まいでした。まあ確かにいずれの被害者とも直接の面識はありませんが。
He said it in a roundabout way. Is he saying she's also connected?
実は調べてみたら竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。
Suspended.
なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
レナが学校中のガラスを割った？
That same spacey Rena had? I couldn't even imagine it.
3日間の謹慎が明けた後も復学しなかったようです。その間に神経科に通院し、何週間かの間投薬と医師によるカウンセリングを受けています。
I wonder if it was something like a nervous breakdown. I'd heard that it happens to people who are really methodical or overly sensitive. Neither of those matched Rena's easygoing personality.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテにレナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、 その中に出てくるんですよ。結構。
It?
何がです？
I pressed forward carelessly. There couldn't be anything more for me to regret.
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
Wow. I felt like someone's stone cold hand was caressing my back. Why? Why had Rena spoken of Oyashiro-sama before she even came to Hinamizawa?
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
My mind froze. I couldn't process what I was being told.
その後、しばらくしてひなみ沢に引っ越されたんです。ああ、そうそう。レナさんはよそ者なんかじゃないですよ。
え？
住民票で分かったんですが、竜宮一家は元はひなみ沢の住人です。レナさんがちょうど小学校に上がるときに茨城へ引っ越されたんです。
My mind went completely blank. It was similar to the static you'd see on a blank TV channel. My ears began ringing as I lost all sense of comprehension.
前原さん、大丈夫ですか？もう終わりにしましょうか。
Those words brought me back. I couldn't let it end here.
レナのことは分かりました。じゃあその最後の被害者の富武さんはどうなんですか？誰と接点があるんですか？
Irritated, I let out one final reprisal.
全員ですよ。お忘れですか、前原さん。みんなで楽しくお祭りの晩を過ごしたじゃないですか。何人もの警官が皆さんの楽しそうな様子を見ていますよ。
Now there is nothing I could respond with. I fell silent as my brain turned to mush.
そろそろ出ましょう。ああ、前原さん。お昼の薬は飲みましたか？
I had completely forgotten about the medicine I had gotten today until Oishi-san said that. How did he know? I got another glass of water and we left the shop after I chugged it down. We got into the car and returned to Hinamizawa via the rough road. I never really paid attention when I was on my bike, but did cars normally shake this much? It was almost as if the road was desperately trying to tell me something. But that big jolt was from the difference in elevation of the road when it changed from cement to dirt. I was certain that I heard Tomitake-san scream. I sat in silence, just letting myself be shaken by the car.
お家の前まで送りましょう。今日は病気でお休みだったんですよね。長々とお話ししてしまって申し訳ありませんでした。
なんで俺に話すんですか？
I blurted out the question. Really, just blurted it out. I didn't expect an answer.
私、一応確認しましたよね。お話やめましょうかって。
じゃなくて、どうして俺に接触してきたんですか？
I understood quite well that Oishi-san was investigating this string of suspicious incidents. But why was he telling me all this? I knew nothing and couldn't help. Everything Oishi-san spoke of was news to me. First of all, what could I, having just moved here, possibly know? By chance, if there was a reason for Oishi-san to reach out to me, then it would have to be that I was part of Mion's circle of friends who looked suspicious to Oishi-san.
私ね、今年で定年なんです。定年したらばあ様の意向で引っ越しちゃう予定なんですよ。だからこそ在職中にこの事件だけははっきりさせておきたかったんです。
で、大石さんは疑ってるんですよね、みんなを。
Oishi-san didn't really give a response. It felt a little late, but I thought it was his way of showing a bit of consideration for my feelings.
これはこの道30年の勘です。前原さん、危ないのはあなたなんですよ。
I wanted to reply with "That's absurd," but in my downtrodden state, I couldn't bring myself to say it.
私は今年で定年ですから、来年の綿流しの日にはもういません。だから今年中に決着をつけたいのです。
In other words, he was insinuating that on the next Watanagashi, I might be the victim.
所長からも注意を受けています。一連の事件は個々に解決しているから蒸し返すなと言うんです。これは一種の圧力です。
圧力って何のですか？
ひなみ沢の誰かですよ。着きました。この辺でいいですか？
After some time, the car finally reached the path to my house. The clock read 2 p.m. I was surprised so little time had passed since we ate. It was hot outside the car. The chirping of the higurashi hurt my ears.
今日の話は全て忘れてくださっても結構です。ですが、私は捜査を続けますよ。お社様のたたりは今年で終わらせます。
何かあったら連絡しろってことですか？
いいんですよ。前原さんがどうしても連絡したくなった時だけでいいんです。
I wasn't collected enough to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying it.
ゆっくり休んでください。病気でお休みの時に良くない話ばかりして申し訳ありませんでしたね。
I didn't really give any sort of response.
私はいつでもあなたの味方です。それだけは信じといてくださいよ。それじゃ失礼。
The tires crunched over the dirt road as the car made a U-turn and disappeared into a cloud of kicked-up dust. It felt like I was watching a boat only throw me a lifesaver in shark-infested waters before disappearing into the distance. That was the first time I thought Oishi-san was being unfair, telling me I was going to be the next victim, then just saying to contact him if something happened. This wasn't a criminal investigation. He was fishing. And I was just the bait dangling off the line. Would the fish be the perpetrator? Or is it really just Oyashiro-sama's curse? Either way, the bait would be swallowed whole.
畜生、俺死にたくないよ。
For some time, I could do nothing but stare at the puddle of water left behind by the AC from the car. Aww. Back at his room. I wonder how much time had passed since I laid down. It was getting dark outside. My body was soaked in sweat. It would probably be a good idea to change my sheets. At that moment, the phone downstairs rang. It was probably Mom. Mom was quite the worrywart. Maybe she had called many times, but I just didn't notice it. Ooh.
もしもし、前原ですけど。
お、生きてた。もしもーし。ミオンだけど。
Mio!
具合はどう？
圭一のお友達ですか？圭一は休んでますけど、代わりましょうか？
お父様で？すみません。
Keiichi, always the jokester.
バカで引っかかってやがるよ。
After our exchange, we both had a good laugh together. Except I was suspicious of her, even as we were laughing. Was everybody really involved in the incidents? The fact that I couldn't say no saddened me.
元気そうで安心したよ。レナもすっごく心配してたよ。さとこはざまあないですわって喜んでたな。リカちゃんは病気でかわいそうですってさ。
チェ、みんなで勝手に大盛り上がりしてたみたいだな。
まあまあ。でさ、ケンちゃん、お見舞いに行っちゃ都合悪いかな。
お見舞い？いいよそんな。重病人ってわけじゃないんだから。
うちのバッチャが山ほどおはぎを作ってさ、お裾分けに持ってけって言ってんだよ。だから持ってくね。
おいおい、風が移っても知らねえぞ。
おじさんもレナもおバカさんだから大丈夫。じゃあね。
Too stupid to catch a cold. She hung up cheerfully. Nena's coming too? That's what it sounded like. I was still concerned about meeting Nena, but I guess if she was with Mion. I heard the doorbell 10 minutes later.
どんな感じ？
I'm worried it's gonna be scary again.
ちゃんと薬飲んで寝てた？
そりゃもうしっかりとな。
元気そうでよかった。心配してたんだよ。
悪かったな。明日にはもう大丈夫だよ。
Mion showed a complete lack of concern for someone who's recovering, and Nana looked like she was worried about me from the bottom of her heart. It didn't look like there was anything behind those expressions.
ちょっとお邪魔しようかと思ったけど、まだ本調子じゃないみたいだね。
そうか？
It seemed my face appeared a bit sullen.
じゃあこれ、ケイチくん、みーちゃんのおばあちゃんが作ってくれたおはぎだよ。
Nana held out the package wrapped in newspaper. There might be about 5 in here. It was quite hefty.
あ、サンキューな。ミオンのばあちゃんによろしく伝えといてくれよ。
その中にね、レナが作ったのも混じってるんだよ。ケイチくんに見つけられるかな。
これ、今日の部活を欠席したケイちゃんへの宿題ね。おはぎにアルファベットがついてるから、明日回答すること。
お見舞いなのか部活なのか、どっちかにしろ。
元気元気。これなら明日は大丈夫そうだね。
この騒ぎで熱がぶり返したらどうしてくれんだよ、まったく。
みーちゃん、あんまり騒いじゃ悪いよ。もう行こう。お家の人にも怒られるよ。
Both of them thought my parents were home. It was because the entranceway was a mess.
そうだね。あ、そうそうケイちゃん。
なんだよ。
お昼何食べた？
Ah! Ooh, her eyes. Mion's a psycho too. I guess so. Oh. Sudden question startled me, and I went wide-eyed when I saw Mion. I'd never seen her like that. It was a highly unsettling visage. But why is she asking me about what I ate for lunch? That one was with Oishi. What she said was so inane, it was almost meaningless. Ooh, those eyes, right? So unsettling. The way she said it, it was almost like she didn't even care at all about what I ate.
表で食べたよ。
She must have suspected that I was with Oishi-san. Anyway, I felt that if I hesitated or tried to change the subject, then they'd read too deep into it. So I tried answering as quickly as possible. Except, contrary to the efforts I had made, there was a pause before they replied. And then his eye is gonna turn scary too. Are we gonna see an image? Yeah, they did!
お昼は外食だったんだね。
The glimmer from Nena's eyes had changed at some point as well. Ooh, it was now sharp, as if to make me feel the feigned ignorance behind her words even more. As if she already knew. That's how it looked to me.
どう？美味しかった？
Yeah, uh-oh. Ruh-roh, oh.
なんでそんなことを聞くんだよ。
Mion was speaking in an unusually low tone. Almost as if she knew that I had eaten at the restaurant in town. No, I'm overthinking this. I mean, both of them should have been in school at lunchtime. There's no way they could have known where I was. Oh, I'm scared.
渋いおじさまとご一緒だったみたいだけど。誰？
She knows. Flop? What's making that sound? The package with the mochi I was holding slipped out of my hands. I could tell the blood had drained from my face, making me go pale.
へえ。ケイチくん、それ誰？ひょっとして、この間の人かな？かな？
I could feel the back of my throat going dry. This was no longer a bluff. They knew everything?
なんでそんなことわかるんだよ。
Took everything I had to finally force those words from my throat. My knees were shaking.
さーてね。
Mion
おじさんにわからないことはないからね。
sneered knowingly, and her laugh seemed to carry on forever.
で、ケイちゃん、何のお話をしてたの？ずいぶんと熱くなってたみたいだけど。
みんなの話はしてないよ。ミオンともレナとも関係ない。
That's a pretty suspicious response. You're like, Keiichi. The smiling is so, with those eyes.
聞いてもないのにレナたちの名前が出るなんて、なんだか怪しいな。
Lena's unwavering gaze pierced through my eyes and peered further inside me. I dug my own grave. Yeah. Keiichi, no. My heart was throbbing so much it felt like it was going to explode.
ま、何を隠れてやろうとも、おじさんにはすべてお見通しってこと。それだけを忘れないでくれればいいかな。
I couldn't even shake my head. It took everything I had to stop my teeth from chattering. She never let her gaze break from mine, even as she tilted her head slightly.
ケイチくん、顔色悪いよ。もう横になった方がいいと思うな。
そうだね。私たちはもう帰ろう。
Her voice is so cheerful, but their eyes, oh. As if nothing had happened, they both giggled at each other and started making their way out. I hadn't moved a muscle since I had dropped the package of mochi. As they left, the door slowly closed behind them. All I could do was stare, as if I couldn't move until the door was completely closed. Just as the door was just about closed, it opened again slightly with a sudden creak, sending my heart racing once again. A single eye peered in through that narrow slit, and Mion's hawkish gaze peered at me once again. Scared me.
じゃあね、ケイちゃん。
あ、
明日、学校休んじゃ嫌だよ。
Thud. The door closed. I wasn't able to move a muscle even after their low laughter died off into the distance, and silence once again enveloped the room. Coming back to my senses, the first thing I did was lock the door. They knew what Oishi-san and I had talked about? Why? How? No, that wasn't important. Thinking about it now, all of it could have been overheard, from the beginning when Oishi-san met me. Just as Mion said, I couldn't hide anything. Then, what were they trying to tell me? That part was obvious. They were warning me not to say anything unnecessary. What did they deem unnecessary? I only talked with Oishi-san about one thing, and they were warning me that that was unnecessary. What was it that Oishi-san talked to me about? The incidents involving Oyashiro-sama's curse that occurred every year weren't individual cases, but were connected as a whole, as well as the fact that there may be multiple perpetrators hidden within Hinamizawa. No, more precisely, that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Nika-chan were all suspicious. Is that what they were warning me against?
何バカなこと考えてんだよ、俺。
I hit my own face hard enough that it let out a loud slap. If only that would wake me from this nightmare, but for some reason it felt like I was punching a blanket. It was almost laughably painless. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. When did I become such a pessimist? Calm down, calm down. Settle down and sort things out. The reason Mion knew I was eating lunch with Oishi-san was probably because somebody from Hinamizawa just happened to be there at the time. They must have told Mion that I was there. That made the most sense. Plus, come to think of it, she didn't ask me where I ate lunch, did she? She only asked, was it good? They were just curious since I was together with someone not from Hinamizawa. It's not as if they had any ulterior motives. That's it. That has to be it. He's in denial. Thinking about it that way, it was the same with Dena. I was just being strangely ambiguous about when I met with Oishi-san, and Dena was just correcting me on that. That was when I was bewildered by the change in character from the usual mild-mannered Dena, and was just startled by it. That's the most natural way of thinking about it. It felt like my mind was mixed up like a tangled mess of spaghetti. Deep red marinara sauce would have poured out my nose and ears if he squeezed my head. Thinking that, I suddenly felt like vomiting. I really didn't want that to happen, so I stopped holding my head. Lately, I had no idea what anyone was saying. Spending time with them was fun. It didn't feel like there was any sort of hidden agenda. I really do think that they're a good bunch of people. When I just moved here and couldn't make heads or tails of anything, they were really kind to me. Dena was really kind and always looked after me. As long as that strange affliction didn't rear its ugly head, she was really pretty cute. Mion was also a really good person. She didn't care about anyone's age or gender, and was optimistic and outgoing. I was never bored when I was with her. And talking of not getting bored, rambunctious Satoko was a good person for that too. She was pretty bratty, but that was just the way she interacted with others. Rika-chan was the same way. She didn't speak often, but that didn't mean she was always silent. They're my friends. But after hearing of the better untold secrets of Hinamizawa from Oishi-san and Tomitake-san, when I was told about Oyashiro-sama's curse, things started going crazy. Then hearing from Oishi-san that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Nika-chan were all suspicious. After that, everyone changed. That's right. It all started getting weird after Oishi-san told me all that strange stuff. At that time, I really should have just not listened to those weird stories. I shouldn't even have asked Tomitake-san about the past incidents on the night of the Watanagashi. If I just hadn't gotten that strange sense of curiosity, if I just hadn't. That's right. So that's why they blanked Tomitake-san. That impudent outsider speaking to the likes of me after everybody went out of their way to keep it a secret from me. They'll probably blink Oishi-san as well. For trying to unearth what everybody was warning me was better left buried. Besides that, it was unforgivable for spewing words that made me doubt the others. Of course a guy like that is going to be blinked. Both Tomitake-san and Oishi-san were nothing but outsiders after all. They were entities who couldn't coexist with the people of Hinamizawa. Those guys should just fall to Oyashiro-sama's curse and just blink. It wasn't their fault. It was my fault for not being able to hold back my curiosity. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault. It wasn't their fault, it wasn't their fault, it wasn't their fault, it wasn't their fault. Is Keiichi okay? I settled into a daze. It was a lethargic feeling like I had just gotten up, but the ominous chill that haunted me had subsided. I was fine now. I was no longer frightened. I had completely recovered. I'll go to school tomorrow, right as rain. I'll greet everyone. I'll take part in club activities. It'll definitely be fun. It had to be fun. I was one of them after all.
あ、そうだ。おはぎ食べないと。どれがレナの手作りか当てないといけないんだよな。
I remembered the homework the two brought with them when they visited me. Oh wow, our club did delivery. That was something else. I picked up the package I dropped on the floor and headed into the living room. It would be nice, I guess, to have some tea with it. To fill my mouth with mochi while drinking tea. Oh. This was quite a delectable situation I was in. Opening up the newspaper wrapping, there were 5 plump red bean paste mochi fit snugly inside. Sounds good. There were letters written from left to right on the newspaper. A, B, C, D, and D. Now then. They said Dena made one of these. I wonder which one. There wasn't much difference in how they looked. They smelled and appeared about the same. This was a pretty difficult problem. The biggest difference was probably their shape. I wasn't sure what kind of person Mion's grandma was, but Rena's had to be different from hers. Looking carefully, I could see one mochi that was made very neatly. So well that, just by staring at it, one could tell it stood out.
この一個がレナのか否かが勝負の分かれ目みたいだな。
Calm down and think even harder. Mion had said her grandma made a ton of them and was told to give some out if I remembered correctly. So that meant 4 of these were from that large batch. And what about Rena? She probably only made 1. So she probably spent quite a bit of time on it. Meaning, the one Rena had made was this one, E. For a moment, I thought it may have been a trap Mion laid as she knew I'd pick up on it, but that probably wasn't the case. The way that there's none of the cheery background music and only the higurashi. It's like, I don't know, is something gonna happen? I wouldn't be so sure if I knew Mion had made it, but since she said Rena made it, it probably wasn't a trap.
よし、お茶も準備 OK。まずはディフェンディングチャンピオンのミオンのばあちゃんからだ。どれ？
No music equals scary times, so true. Yeah. Not bad. The smooth bean paste and soft chewy texture left little to be desired. The tea I drank afterwards also accentuated the experience. This was an exquisite piece of work. Now, what about Rena's? The creation was so delicate, one would think it was a high-class Japanese dessert. Since I normally had quite the appetite, I was slightly worried about the size of the portion. But, well, first, a bite. This is quite a difficult one to judge, actually. The ingredients were exactly the same, so there was little difference in flavor. What was different was how it was shaped at the end, so it was to be expected. So the deciding factors would be presentation and volume. The well-formed and well-sized champion versus Rena the challenger, with a size you just couldn't get enough of. I'd only had 1 bite of Rena's. I'd probably have to wait until after I was done eating to make my decision. Maybe there is something hidden inside that could cause an upset. It seems my prediction was right. My tongue touched something. It didn't feel like something edible, so I reached in with my fingers and grabbed it. What? Spooky music is like, what was this? That sound scared me. Before I could fully comprehend what it was, I threw away the rest of the mochi I was eating as fast as I could. It slammed against the wall, causing the bean jam to splatter. Then, after sticking for a moment, it slid down to the floor. I was dumbstruck by my own actions. What was I doing? Rena had gone out of her way to make it for me. How could I? Dumbstruck, I looked down at my hand that had performed such a vile act, and I remembered what I had taken out of my mouth. At first I thought it was a hair. Even though it was shorter than Mion's, Rena's hair was still quite long. And it wasn't this short. It was also a bit too hard to be hair. It was thick enough to roll around on my tongue. There was a bit of a metallic sheen on one end of it. Ah yes, there was a hole for where thread goes through, like it was a sewing needle. Yes, that's right. It looked very much like a sewing needle. Exactly like one. The end was pointed as well, quite sharply. It really did look just like a sewing needle. Huh? What did I mean by looked very much like a sewing needle just a bit ago? I couldn't answer. But a voice inside me already knew, and let me know by chattering my molars together. I couldn't stave off the terror welling up inside me. Suddenly, I tasted something metallic and felt a prickling pain at the back of my throat. I stuck my finger in the back of my mouth and felt around to see if I was bleeding. Suddenly, I felt the urge to vomit. Right? This is so... The sharp taste of bile irritated the back of my throat. I clasped both hands over my mouth, and, after writhing in agony, I was somehow able to hold back the nausea. I was finally able to breathe normally again, but this time my heart was throbbing intensely. Then it finally registered. Exactly what was mixed in with the mochi. Before I could think of the correct word, my hands were already on the... Good thing you didn't swallow a pretty short visual novel otherwise. Yeah. Splat. Plop. Splort. I tossed the rest of the mochi against the wall. They're there. The geometrical patterns of the scattered bean jam on the wall suddenly invoked a terrible omen in my mind. After looking away, I dashed out to the hall and flew upstairs to my room, where I stayed under my covers until morning. I clutched my own shoulders, howling madly in a mix of fear, anger, sadness, and frustration. This wasn't a threat, or warning, or reminder, nothing as simple as that. What had happened in Hinamizawa? What is happening in Hinamizawa? What would happen? I didn't know the answer to any of those questions. Where did I break a taboo? Regardless, now Rena and Mion, and others, they consider me an enemy. They thought, I should just die. I won't let you kill me. Not for such a pointless reason. I fell into a restless sleep as I was crushed by my negative emotions. It was as if I was being drawn into a billowing, bottomless swamp. Sewing needle in mochi. Man. Scary. Tips. New achievement unlocked. Hard to swallow. Let's see. What's a drug that makes you commit suicide?
単刀直入に自殺させる薬ってないんですか？
直接的にはない。
遠回しですね。では間接的にはあるってことですか？
自殺したくなる精神状態を誘発することはできるちゅうことだ。
難しい言い方になりましたね。何ですかその自殺したくなる精神状態ってのは。
例えば一般的な心理学見地から言えばじゃが、心理面が内向状態から外向状態に転じるときに最も自殺が多いと言われちょる。
Clinical depression and bipolar disorder are different. Clinical depression indicates a prolonged state of depression, whereas bipolar disorder is characterized by a passive depressed state accompanied by a very active manic state.
内向状態の時は自信を喪失し非常に悲観的だ。だが自殺もせん。自殺をする気力すらないからだ。逆の状態もまた自殺をせん。今度は逆に非常に自信過剰で行動的なので自らを順風満帆と思う。
なるほどね。どっちの状態でも自殺をしないのに状態が入れ替わるときに自殺するんですか？
内向状態には自殺願望はあるが自殺という大仕事を遂げる気力すらもない。だが外向状態が始まると徐々に気力が充実し体の自由が利くようになってくる。
なるほど。つまり自殺する気力が回復するわけですね。
そういうことじゃのう。だからこの時期に変な気を起こさんように処方箋を施すわけじゃな。
では 富武氏はこの心理状態だったんですかね。
一般的に自殺はちゃんとした文化的な手法で行われる。道具を使用してな。自虐行動とは全く違うぞい。
富武氏の自殺は文化的じゃないですよね。ではやっぱり何かの中毒と考えるのが自然ですか。最初に言った自殺したくなる精神状態を起こす薬ってのを教えてください。
鎮痛薬の一部には心理を内向から外向に過剰転換させる効果があると報告されとる。それから催眠作用を持つ薬を異常摂取した場合にも異常行動が報告されとるが、あまり一般的ではないの。
その2つは検視の報告だと違うみたいですね。他の可能性は？
あとは病気しか考えられん。甲状腺異常を引き起こす病気にしばしばそれに似た症状が報告されとる。だがそれらは概して特徴的な症状が多い。仏は違うの。
もっと突発的に発生するものはありませんかね。今回のケースと合うような突発性で自殺したくなるようなやつです。
他には？そうじゃな。脳障害によって精神に異常を発生する状態じゃな。これは薬物中毒でも起こるが、脳の外傷や一部の病気なんかでも起こる。
つまり薬によらなくても異常な精神状態に陥る可能性があると。
仏は犯人に囲まれて命に危険が迫っとったんじゃろ。極度の緊張が続いて、それに分泌異常が重なって、さらに打ちどころが悪くて脳に障害が起こり自虐行動に走った。
もうちょっと省略して言ってくれませんかね。
つまり乱闘中に豆腐の角に頭ぶつけて、それで異常が発生したと言っとるんだ。
じゃあ星には殺意はなかったってことですかね。ちょいと小銭を巻き上げようと思ったらたまたま殴りどころが悪かったと。
The two plump men laughed hoarsely.
なんてわけはありませんね。
いかにも薬物の常用にせよ精神的なものにせよ、仏の身元が鍵を握っとるぞい。そっちはどうなっとるんじゃ。
あら、こんな時間、そろそろ戻らないと
Just avoiding the question.
おお、頑張れよ。いいお年をの。
いいお年を。
Right? Threat.
おや？今の皆さんは確か
議員バッジが2人いたっすね。
じゃあ県議と市議の園崎だ。
Sonozaki.
面白いっすね。親戚。
Oopsie.
これがずるいんですよ。お互いの名前で慈善運動バンバン。
They're related.
片方の選挙中にはもう片方が別に講演会を開いて二重に選挙運動やってんですよ。堂々と。
よくわかんないんすけど、それって公選法違反じゃないんすか？
慈善運動にならない限り政治活動は無制限ですからね。クーマちゃん、そんなんじゃ選対本部好きになった時大変ですよ。公選法くらいは勉強してください。
俺、知能犯科は無理っす。バカですから。
Baka desu kara. There's Prefectural Assembly Member Sonozaki and City Councilor Sonozaki. Also, the Mayor of Hinamizawa. So, they're all influenced by the Sonozaki family. What crap.
お見送りしてんのは副所長とうちの課長っすね。
It came to me. That night, when the department chief invited me along to get some molden, I thought that was it.
大石さんは友達多いから聞いてるかもしれないけど、聞いてるかな。
いいえ、何も。
お母さん、ガモにはんぺん頼みます。 所長のとこに議員の怒鳴り込みがあったんだよ。
あれま、そうなんですか。あ、お母さん、私にもう一杯ください。
Prefectural Assembly member Somozaki and City Councilor Somozaki were both intimidating. Our snot-nosed career police chief couldn't handle being yelled at them. They're like Yakuza.
ひなみ沢事件の捜査の仕方で君を指名して陳情してきたよ。
ありゃ、私はてはて。
とぼけるなよ。例のひなみ沢の過去の事件。蒸し返してるだろ。
私、富武殺しで手一杯でそんな余裕ないですよ。ね。
本当に？本当にそうならいいんだけどさ。
There was a period of silence. While we were silent, we made headway on our food and drink.
いやー、ごちそうになっちゃいました。今月は負けっぱなしだったんで財布つらかったんですよ。助かりました。
いや、いいよ。
助かる。
また馬教えてよ。大井さんと同じ馬を買うから。
馬ぴょい、馬ぴょい。
最近はダメです。馬の声がさっぱりですから。タクシー！
I'm going by train. The department chief is taking a taxi. I have my own car, but it'd be rash to drive it home. Can't blow it right before retirement with a DUI. Even though he could still rattled off, it looked like his legs were already jelly. Pushing him into the cab, I gave the driver the department chief's address.
ではではまた明日。良いお年を。
大井さん。
はいはい。
過去の事件は全部個別に終わってる。縦に並べるのはやめるんだよ。村の連中は半ば本気でタタリを信じてるんだから。
私だってタタリなんか信じちゃいませんよ。
大石さんは来年で退職じゃないですか。退職金でローン返してお母さんと北海道に引っ越すんじゃなかったっけ？
ばあ様がどうしても生まれの北海道に帰りたいって泣くんですよ。最後のご奉公なんです。退職金はまあ歓楽街で楽しむことにしますな。
所長は退職時特別昇給を見直すかもってさ。
A public servant's severance payment is calculated based on their monthly salary when they retire. So, a special promotion of 2 pay grades is given before retirement. This tops up the employee's severance payment. That tends to be how it's done around here. Of course, it's not exactly a commendable custom. Incidentally, the difference that 2 pay grades makes to the payout is quite significant.
さすがインテリの若所長は言い出すことが模範的です。
Egghead chief.
でもまあ、私たちの給料が血税で支払われてることを思えば、まあ時代の流れですかね。
It certainly wasn't a laughing matter, but I'll laugh through it anyway.
僕も模範的なこととは思わないよ。でもまあ、大石さんはそれだけの退職金をもらってもおかしくない活躍をしてきたからさ。僕としてはぜひもらってほしいんだよ。
もらえるもんならそりゃ欲しいですけどね。
もらえるよ。大石さんが大人なら。
運転手さん、引き止めてすみませんね。お願いします。
I closed the door roughly, interrupting the department chief's conversation a bit rudely. It looked like he still had something to say, but he just smiled wryly and waved. I waved in return. The cab sped up gradually and soon disappeared among the sea of lights. Ugh, it's close.
参ったな。ローン返済できるかな。
Loan. Okay. Save. Continue. I'll probably go through just the next, through chapter 10. And then, yeah. The sound of muffled footsteps stopped in front of the door to my room. A moment of silence, as if whoever they belonged to was ascertaining if I was inside. Of all the things I should have been doing, I continued on with my restless slumber. I was very much conscious, but my body hadn't caught up yet, even with danger bearing down on me from just beyond the door. It was as if I was completely paralyzed, unable to move. Without a doubt, this was sheer terror. Please, just leave. Hey, why isn't my body awake yet? If they came into my room right now, then... Okay, it's just his mom. I sprung to my feet and threw my covers at my mom, who was opening the door.
何ケイチ、どうしたの？
寝ぼけてた。
I thought it was still 1 or 2 a.m., but the morning sun was already streaming through the gap between the curtains. It felt nothing like morning. Yesterday, I must have fallen asleep right after that. And I should have gotten a full 10 hours of rest, but it didn't feel like that at all. My internal clock was completely screwed up and my sense of balance felt off. I felt feverish enough that it was clear to me that I was still not well.
どうケイチ、体の調子はどう？学校行けそう？
I felt far from well enough. No, I wasn't mentally fit to go. I was still plagued with the terror from yesterday. If I had swallowed that needle, what would have happened? Or what if it had pierced my tongue? There was undoubtedly a murderous intent, but I don't think that's all it was. If they really wanted to kill me, then there were other, more certain ways to do it. They wouldn't resort to such a dubious method as having me swallow a needle. Meaning, I didn't want to believe it, but going that far was just a threat from Rena and Mion. Aren't you glad you didn't die? But next time, we'll use a more assured method. Like that. Something like sending a letter with a razor inside would have been a joke compared to this.
ちゃんと病院は行った？お薬は飲んだの？
まあ一応。
Something about my mom's dubious gaze bothered me. She seemed more concerned about her son missing 2 days of school rather than him being sick. It was definitely mental fatigue. I wasn't really physically ill.
一度生活のリズムを崩すとなかなか戻らないんだから。さら、起きて起きて。病は気からって言うのよ。
I'd heard that line many times before. I was given an award in elementary school for having perfect attendance. But it wasn't like I was healthier than anyone.
ささ、顔洗ってらっしゃい。ご飯はもうできてるわよ。もうレナちゃんが来るまで
Rena,
あんまり
oh
時間がな
yeah,
いわ
yo
よ。
yo yo. Mom's tone meant I couldn't argue about it, so I had to give up on skipping a second day.
そうそう。今の壁にぼたもちを投げつけたのはケイチ？ダメよ、あんなことしちゃ。お父さん、怒ってたわよ。
I didn't feel particularly guilty for doing it, so I didn't have much of a reaction. Also, Mom didn't question me any further about it. She headed back downstairs after she was certain I was getting up. Well, Mion said as she left yesterday, "I'd hate it if you missed school tomorrow." Came back and dwelled in the back of my head. What did she mean by that? I didn't even have to really think about it. She was saying, "Don't be absent." Taking that a bit further, it was the same as her saying I should just go about living my life as if nothing happened. If I showed any signs of acting unusual, it would probably result in them making their move. If I acted differently, someone like Oishi-san, for example, might end up noticing that something is up. Meaning, if I didn't watch my mouth or did anything differently from the norm, in effect, it would end up communicating something to those who were undesirable. And it seems that was something that the girls didn't intend to forgive. So if I just went along as normal, no harm would come to me. Was that how it was going to be? All that misery I experienced up until yesterday would, almost creepily, just fade away. It was an enticing deal. Just by forgetting everything I'd seen or heard these last few days, I'd be able to keep on living like normal.
そんな虫のいい話あるわけ？
I swallowed hard. I once again deliberated on the idea that I had just rejected. Mion was probably a good person who had her friends at heart. She was giving me, who had mistakenly broken some rule of theirs, a chance. Was what I did really something so unforgivable? Mion had given me another chance. She was saying, if I just forgot everything and kept living on like I had been, I'd be forgiven.
ケイチ、ご飯冷めちゃうわよ。急いで降りてらっしゃい。早くしないとレナちゃんが来ちゃうわよ。
あ、今行くよ。
I crammed my textbooks into my bag and hastily made my way downstairs. I picked at my somewhat bland breakfast. It seemed that I didn't have much time. It was already past when I usually met up with Dena. Given yesterday's events, she'd probably be here in the next 5 minutes. I needed to be ready to head to school by then. I had to forget everything that had happened the past 2 days. Forget it all and return to my normal life. For this to be normal, I'd have to be where I normally meet up with Dena. Today of all days, the rice was dry and hard to get down. I jumped at the sound and dropped my chopsticks. There she is. That chime signaled that Dena had arrived. Mom hurried me along.
ほら、レナちゃん来ちゃったわよ。急いで急いで。
My mother's merry smile and my gloomy face were polar opposites. Honestly, I was reluctant to see Dena, who was waiting there on the other side of the door. The Dena on the other side. Was it the Dena I knew? I couldn't keep her waiting. I needed to do things as usual. An invigorating greeting filtered in from across the doorway.
ケイチ君、遅かったから来てみたけど、今日はどうかな
Oh yeah, the manner in which Dena was concerned was, without a doubt, the Dena I knew. But that was probably only if I reciprocated. Forget everything from yesterday. Pretend as though nothing had happened. Forget about the gruesome dismemberment. Forget about the mysterious deaths that happened the following years. Forget about the people falling to death, and the terminal illness and suicide, the fatal beatings, and the disappearances. Forget it. Forget all of it. Forget that Dena and Mion were scary. Of course, forget it all. Forget about all of it. Forget about the mochi too. Forget. Dena, once again, asked to make sure.
学校、行けそう？
大丈夫だよ。
よかった。じゃあ行こう。みーちゃん待ってるよ。
Nana showed me her usual bright smile. I couldn't find any hint of deceit in her expression. My nervousness dissipated, giving way to relief. Ugh.
なのにさとこちゃんね、絶対にできるって意地になっちゃって。
As we were walking, Nana talked about a lot of different stuff, more so than usual.
それで？
さとこちゃんブキッとだから何度やってもできないの。はう、かいかったんだよ。
How? Everything Nana talked about was just silly nonsense, so I just replied every so often and laughed from time to time. It was a rather laid-back conversation. We passed by one of our neighbors and they called out to us.
あれ？ケイチちゃんにレナちゃん。今日はちょっと遅いんじゃないの？ミオンちゃん先に行くって言ってたわよ。
みーちゃん怒ってるかな？怒ってるかな？早く行こう、ケイチ君。
After greeting our neighbor with a smile, Nana turned back to me and poked her tongue out. Not expecting that, I couldn't help but crack a smile.
ケイチ君笑った。
なんだよ。
Nana stopped and stared at me.
ケイチ君、今朝もなんか元気なかったから、まだ風邪が治らないのかなって思ってたけど、大丈夫みたいだね。だね。
With a grin, she gently poked my cheek. It was a bright, sincere smile. Hey, Keiichi Maebara. How can you still doubt Nana after she shows you a smile like that? Maybe I just had a high fever up until today, and I imagined everything that I thought happened because I was bedridden and delirious? I really hoped that was the case. If God would grant me just one wish. There's only one thing that I'd wish for. I would want what had happened in the past few days. More specifically, from the night of the Watamagashi up until last night. I wanted all of that to have never happened. I wonder how many times I'd wished for this these past few days. As long as Dena kept smiling like this, I think it might just become reality. So I wanted Dena to keep on smiling. Keep on smiling.
で、ケイチくん。
Is it gonna be scary again? Oh, no. Or,
昨日のおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれた？
The sound effect. Oh my goodness. Oh, there's a line there. That vain wish of mine was instantly shattered. You scared me. I scared myself a little too, I think. My heart began palpitating. The relaxed morning mood suddenly became frigid. Nana's smile was the same as usual. Her eyes were gentle as usual. Those mochi yesterday, did you eat them all? Of course she wasn't asking the question at face value. In other words, Nana was asking, did you get the message? She was probably trying to convey that.
ケイチくん？
I was reluctant to give an answer. Then I stopped walking and stared deeply into my eyes. Don't hesitate, Kiichi Maebara. Then was acting the same as always, wasn't she? I needed to respond in my usual way. Naturally, of course. Both my throat and mouth had gone dry, and my lips were stuck together. Hurry and answer, Keiichi. Not that much time had passed. I could still keep the conversation going naturally. I had to say something quickly. Then I playfully mimicked what I had said when I finally squeaked something out. Then his reaction was still normal. It seems that there wasn't as long of a pause as I had thought. Somehow, I finally squeaked out the rest. However, my strained efforts neither sullied nor brightened Anna's expression. For a moment, I panicked, thinking I had replied incorrectly. But after a few moments, Dena broke into her usual soft smile and giggled with a joyful voice that seemed to echo through the morning air. Being strung along by that laugh, I couldn't help but laugh as well.
そうなんだ。
で、
全部食べたのかな？かな？
When the music... My timid smile froze again. Did you make it without swallowing the sewing needle? Was that what she was asking? If I had swallowed it, then I wouldn't be here.
いや、全部は食べきれなかったからさ、まだ残ってるんだよ。
I was scared out of my wits, but that's how I played it.
あれれ？どれがレナが作ったのか当てる宿題はどうなっちゃったのかな？
あの宿題って今日までだったっけ？
うん、今日までなんだよ。みーちゃん怒るよ。
Oh, yeah.
きっと罰ゲームだね。
We both laughed at each other again. To a casual observer, it was just a typical morning. If I could just let myself believe, then even I'd think it was just the usual morning routine. But I was certain I wasn't mistaken. There was something unimaginable buried beneath the facade of this giggling Dena. Yeah. I recalled that unexpected piercing voice that I could hardly believe came from Dena's mouth. The moment that image crossed my mind, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. Was it only at that particular time that something evil had possessed Dena? No, that was wrong. That was still Dena. Oishi-san told me, didn't he?
実は調べてみたら、竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に 学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
Lena had a disorder that normal people didn't. No matter how pleasantly she smiled, that fact would not change. But I couldn't even imagine how she looked as she broke all the glass throughout the school. One thing I knew was that it wasn't something spur of the moment. If it was some sudden outburst of anger, then maybe she'd break a pane or two. But she broke all of the windows all throughout her school. Just imagine going through your own school, breaking the windows with a bat. Ui. Swinging full force at each pane of glass, one after another, paying no heed to the flying shards. Your classmates aghast, unable to move from the sudden turn of events. I wonder where she could have found the most windows lined up in a row. Probably the hallway. Walk, wind up. Walk, wind up. It was difficult for me to connect that horrifying image with the Donna smiling at me right now. But I just had to imagine it. Impossible because it was unimaginable. That naive way of thinking no longer worked. The unpleasant piercing sound of shattered glass, the crunching noise as Donna treads across the broken shards, walking towards me. Lena's classmates going pale, as they forget to even breathe. I wondered what they did as Lena came closer, breaking windows along her path. Did they earnestly try to bring her to her senses by saying something? Or did they jump at her, trying to stop her savagery? Or did they run to the staff room to call for the teachers? Probably none of those. In the face of that blood-curdling sight of Dena busting window after window, undoubtedly, all they could do was silently clear a path for her. Dumbfounded, just clearing the path for Dena to continue. It would be cruel to blame anyone for looking the other way. No, they weren't simply looking the other way. They knew it was the only way they could to protect themselves. If they had done something differently from the rest, they may have suddenly found themselves as Dena's new target. What would Dena have done to whoever attracted her attention? The answer was obvious. She would have undoubtedly acted according to her whims. Meaning I would, be the next window. Dena, staring into my eyes, shards of glass crunching and crackling underfoot as she drew closer. I was also drawn into her eyes, paralyzed. Then Dena struck me with the bat over and over again, like I was one of those windows. I crouched down onto the floor, desperately protecting my head. And I didn't care whether it was my head or my back. Zealously, she hits me again and again. What kind of expression was she making as she was doing this over and over again? I peered up to see. Her expression was so indifferent, it was completely unnerving. It's because no matter how many times she struck me, I didn't make as pleasant a sound as the other windows. She struck me continuously, over and over again. The sound Dena wanted didn't come out. Our classmates standing around didn't try to stop her. They didn't want to be the next window. Somebody save me. Turning a blind eye unless we're hanging out? But of course, everyone in class scrambled to obtain the highest standardized test scores. They'd gain nothing from saving a cram school tryhard like me. Eventually, there would be a faint sound, similar to when you'd crack open a walnut, and some sort of reddish-black spray would shoot out. Anyway, it wasn't that Dena momentarily lost herself in her anger. After forcing myself to breathe and calming down my heart, I recalled what Oishi-san told me.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテにレナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、その中に出てくるんですよ、結構。
何がです？
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
Following that, Rena was suspended and had regular examinations at the hospital. Then, as Rena was undergoing counseling, she said it over and over. Oyashiro-sama.
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
That was only a piece of their conversation, so I still couldn't see the big picture, but it was by no means a happy little conversation. Then what Rena did? Was she saying that ghastly incident was a result of her being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? Up until now, I didn't want to believe in Oyashiro-sama's curse. That's why I wanted to say the mysterious deaths every year happened because of some sort of conspiracy. Every time I talked with Oishi-san, I was more certain that the deaths were the work of men and not of some curse. Except, if it was people perpetrating the incidents, my friends were somehow deeply connected. If I refused to believe that the curse was real, then I would have to believe those who acted the kindest to me were deeply involved in the incidents. Why? How? For what reason? Was Rena? Was everybody? It was much more painful and troublesome than accepting that it was just Oyashiro-sama's curse. I kept right-clicking, In the aftermath, Rena had admitted to her doctor that it was because she was possessed by Oyashiro-sama. I felt a strange sense of relief from that. So that's how it was. There wasn't a second side to Rena. She did that because she was possessed by something strange, like Oyashiro-sama. It wasn't Rena's fault. Oyashiro-sama was the one to blame. I knew. This was all backwards. Refusing to believe there is a curse, I wanted there to be a human perpetrator. Now that my close friends were the ones under suspicion, I changed my beliefs at my own convenience, saying it was Oyashiro-sama's curse to blame. Which was the better choice? Accepting that Oyashiro-sama's curse exists, or that Rena and the rest of them were deeply involved in the string of mysterious deaths? I didn't want to think about it. If I just didn't think about it, I'd be able to continue the same as always. I wanted to believe that, but that was no longer possible. I had received their message. It was pathetic of me to try and bend the meaning to my own convenience. Regardless of whether my opponent were a human or a curse, I won't let it kill me. As if I would just bend over and give in, for no good reason at all.
ケイチ君、さっきから変な顔してる。なんでだろう。
Inhaling sharply upon hearing Nana's voice, I came back to my senses. Before I had realized it, we were already at the entrance. Shaking my head a few times, I exorcised all those terrifying thoughts. No matter how you looked at it, there's no way Rena could have done such terrible things. It was like I was trying to placate myself. What a silly sound. As I slid the door open, a blackboard eraser loaded with chalk dropped down on my head the moment I stepped into the classroom. The chalk dust went into my eyes, inducing a brief moment of agony. Satoko! The truant.
ケイイチもレナもおはようございますです。おはよう、さとこちゃんにリカちゃん。
Not quite in the mood for it, I didn't really react to Satoko's trap. Satoko braced herself as I passed by, expecting me to attack her. She seemed a bit disappointed as I simply walked by silently.
何なんですの？張り合いがありません？ケイイチ、まだ本調子じゃないみたいです。だから今日は加減してあげてね。
Suddenly, there was a slap down on my shoulder. It hurt a bit.
よ、ケイちゃん、しっかり休んできた？
It was Mion. My mind was full with the stuff about Rena, but Mion was also a party of interest. Remember, Keiichi, That hawkish gaze from yesterday.
ああ、おはよ
なんだなんだ。随分と覇気のない挨拶じゃん。差し入れのおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれなかったの？
I'm like this because I ate them. Those words were itching to be blurted
う。
out.
やっぱ食欲がなくてさ、いくつかは食べたけど、だいぶ残しちゃったんだ。
あれ、じゃあ宿題は？どれがレナの手作りかってのの回答は？
ケイチくん宿題忘れなんだって。
ありゃー。じゃあ仕方ないね。罰ゲーム。
What's the game? Flashing a lurid smile, Mion returned to her seat. There was nothing from our exchanges that would cause our classmates to suspect anything was amiss. But of course, anyone listening to our conversations up until this morning wouldn't see anything suspicious. That's why it was so frightening. They acted in a way that, regardless of whatever happened to Keiichi Maebara, no one would ever suspect them. That fact had me terrified. Soon the teacher came. After she asked how I felt and took attendance, another dull, ordinary day began. This free study period was a convenient time to consider where I stood. I gently closed my eyes and pondered the ridiculous position I was in right now. First of all, what I shouldn't forget was how dangerous of a situation I was in. I had fallen out of favor with them. After interacting with Oishi-san multiple times, I could see it as I was getting closer to the matter. The warning yesterday with the mochi was a good indicator of that. No, calling it a warning was just my habit of understating things. It probably had no meaning beyond stunting my progress and buying themselves some time. Until they had a method of completely erasing me, they were just biding their time. Even though they were keeping me under their thumb with threats, it didn't change the fact that I knew too much. The chilling sensation of my desk made me recall Satoshi Hojo, the boy who was using the seat until last year when he disappeared. Was he also similar to me? Did he learn something he shouldn't have and was erased? Damn. I wouldn't let them get rid of me so easily. Never. But were they really trying to kill me? I've had these contradictory feelings for a while now. Even though I suspected them, I felt like I had to cover for them. Even having witnessed all of their suspicious behavior, a morning like this just made it seem like an elaborate hoax. No, that's just what I wanted to believe. Doubting my friends? Covering for them? My life was in danger. Or was it? Actually, I was debating the wrong point. Given my current situation, those points were something that should have been deliberated on a long time ago. But really, Rena and the rest of them, were they actually aiming to kill me? The little voice inside me continued to torment me with these unresolvable trains of thought. Are you an idiot, Keiichi Maebara? The answer should be obvious. But maybe that sewing needle might have just been an accident, right? How could you screw up and drop a sewing needle into a piece of mochi? The benefit of the doubt can only go so far. Both Nana and Mion had acted and behaved suspiciously. Maybe it was all some sort of misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? It wasn't just suspicious. It was outright ludicrous, right? Nana just corrected me for lying, and Mion only asked me about what I had for lunch. Nana was standing outside my door eavesdropping for a solid hour? She was probably just waiting for my phone call to end. For a whole hour outside your room? Is it normal to go home afterwards without saying anything? You heard from Oishi-san, didn't you? About what Nana did at her former school? But at the hospital, she said it was Oyashiro-sama's fault.
いい加減にしろよ、前原圭一。お前、命を狙われてるって自覚あるのかよ。
Oh, he said those out loud? Ugh. I inadvertently blurted those words out loud. Hearing myself say that so directly left me dumbfounded for a few moments. Afterwards, I had to look around to check if anyone else had heard it. My little soliloquy cut a little too close to the truth. Even though I could feel the murderous intent from then on the others, part of me somewhere was still trying to deny that. This late in the game, such hesitation could be fatal. I knew that. But I was just your average student, a man living his normal, ordinary life. Do you think I could suddenly believe that my friends who I'd been happily laughing together with up until last Sunday now intended to kill me? Right?
構えるな、圭一。
This time I remembered to keep my voice down so only I could hear it. There's one thing I now understood. I was too soft. I didn't completely understand how dangerous Rena and the rest of them were. No, I wasn't trying to understand. I was too soft for not listening to Oishi-san when he was earnestly showing me the heart of the matter. I didn't listen because I was too busy pretending to be dejected. I didn't comprehend it. I was just running away. I didn't comprehend it, so nobody had any notion to try and kill me. I needed to get rid of such naive thoughts. As I made that resolution, I heard the bell signaling the end of class. So soon. The day was already over. I didn't recall eating lunch or doing anything in class. My friends were putting their desks together in preparation for club activities. Not long ago, I probably would have happily jumped into that circle.
あらあら、ケイチさん。帰り支度とはあんまりですことよ。
Aw. The way Satoko spoke was so typical and familiar. It almost physically hurt.
あれケイチくん、今日は都合悪いのかな今日こそ二人で大勝利。
Wow, that feels like so long ago now when they were just playing Clue. Oh man. Seeing Rena's expression, which said she was really looking forward to today, was hard to take. Hey, Keiichi. Maybe Oishi-san is just some enormous jerk trying to separate me from the others by lying to me? Slap. Trying to expunge such weak-minded thinking, I slapped myself in the face.
ケイチくん
Yeah. Was Rena really trying to kill me? I wish someone would tell me it was a hoax. I didn't care if it actually was one or not. I just wanted someone to say it was. Gah. Yet another weak-willed thought. How did I ever become this naive?
大丈夫頭痛いの
Apparently that was how my inner dilemma appeared to Rena.
顔色悪いよ。一人で帰れる送ってった方がいいかな。
いや、いい。ごめん。一人で帰れる。部活はみんなでやってくれよ。
Upon hearing that I wasn't going to participate in the club meeting, Mion pouted unhappily.
ケイちゃんがリベンジ熱望してたってんで今日はせっかくこの
ケイチさんにはリターンマッチに臨む熱いハートはありませんですの
熱いハート。
情けないですわね。
I wouldn't fall for some dumb taunt. Without even a real retort, I just grabbed my bag and was about to get up. Someone's hand perched itself gently on my head.
ケイチ、具合悪そうです。かわいそうですよ。
It was Rika-chan. She was stretched up as far as she could, doing her best to pat my head with her petite hand. It felt so nice, which made things even harder.
ごめんな、みんな。じゃ。
That's all I said as I quickly left the classroom. They said something to me as I was leaving, but I couldn't make it out. I managed to make it all the way to the entrance in that state of mind, took out my shoes, put them on, and went forward. Forward. Heart in that heart, Keiichi Maebara. They were, for some unfathomable reason, trying to kill me. They were plotting something dubious, watching my every move. But I couldn't hate them. Because weren't they my friends? Part of me lamented my naivety, while another part lamented the fact that I had lost something important by lamenting over it in the first place. It felt like my personality was being ripped in two, along with my body. This is what Oyashiro-sama's curse was like. Then it was just too harsh. Hey, Oyashiro-sama, I was wrong for not believing in your curse. But I believed in it now, completely. Your curse does exist. So seriously, give me a break. I beg you, come on. Oh, nighttime? Dinner was unusually bland. It had no flavor or aroma. The miso soup that normally tantalized my appetite instead tasted like nothing but boiled water. Dad was eating with us that night. It was a rare occurrence in this household. When he got into his work, he ate and slept on his own schedule. My dad never cared about the time. Since my dad was at the dinner table, it either meant he had just reached a good point to take a break, or he was in a slump.
とにかく作家のモチベーションってものを理解してないんだよ、彼は。
タイアップの話だって口約束なんでしょ。そんなに反りが合わないならきっぱりお断りしたら。
助け合いの世界だからお互い様だとは思うんだけどこれじゃ仕事にな。
I wasn't able to pick out much of my mom and dad's conversation, but I could tell it wasn't a very pleasant topic. That, of course, made the disgusting food even less appealing. Staring listlessly at the exchange between my parents, my mind wandered off to the same thought processes I had going all day long. Friends close to me, no, they used to be friends, but I could no longer trust them. Right now, I was greatly lacking in allies. People I trusted, people I could depend on when push came to shove. They were something I just didn't have. Having just one ally would have been incredibly reassuring in the currently hopeless situation I was in. I put down my chopsticks and looked over at my parents, who were still talking about work. The first course of action that came to mind was to tell my parents everything. Currently, there wasn't a single person from Hinamizawa I could trust 100%. That meant the only people I could trust were my parents. But if I told them everything that had happened up until now, would they understand? Rena, for example. That neighborly Rena, who was so diligent in looking after me, came to get me every day, and sometimes brought over a share of what she made. How could I explain that she wanted to kill me? No matter how I explained, it would probably be difficult for anybody to comprehend. My somewhat eccentric dad wouldn't understand, and my high-strung mom would probably drag me off to a psychiatrist in the blink of an eye. Sadly, that was the amount of trust that existed in our relationship. Even if they did come to understand, what could they possibly do? Unless they could uncover the truth, they wouldn't be able to protect me. No, by informing them of these unnecessary things, I'd be putting my parents in danger as well. Considering that the victims in past incidents were often married couples, I couldn't even joke about it. For the entire Maebara family to have an incident, or to just vanish into thin air, it was easily possible in Hinamizawa. What was important here was that knowing something unnecessary puts you in danger. The most unsettling question was, how did they know that I knew? As long as they didn't know, my parents might not fall victim. That was one way to think about it, I guess. At least it was like that in my case. After I found out, things started becoming odd. In other words, it meant the following. As long as my parents didn't know anything, nothing would happen to them. Which means that this house would be a safe haven as long as my parents were in. I knew these were just assumptions based on conjecture on top of conjecture. Wanting this house to be a safe haven. That was the pinnacle of my weak-willed method of thinking. I had to concede that it was not completely safe. It was only safer than the outside. I knew that I couldn't rely on my parents. No, I couldn't risk getting my parents involved. Then, the only person who could be my ally would be Oishi-san. Him, and him alone. He was the only person who understood the situation I was in. He didn't care so much about my safety, but he was without a doubt passionate about solving this case. It was a bit frustrating. Oishi-san was basically the reason I was in this mess. Now to get out of it, I had to rely on him. Meaning, it was all going according to his devices. It was just my job to look appetizing while bobbing in the waves as bait. Then, when the fish started gathering around, Oishi-san would pull up the big haul. It was slightly infuriating, but even I thought that was the best course of action. So then, what should I do? Patience was the first rule of fishing. Just keep waiting until the fish actually bites. But I wasn't simply bait. There were lots of ways for me to struggle before being devoured. When they struck, I needed to somehow dodge just enough and tug out to Oishi-san. No question. It was going to be hard. The timing to bring Oishi-san in would be difficult. He was in the city, not Hinamizawa, so if I phoned him in my moment of need, it would take him about 30 minutes to reach me, so I needed to run away for those 30 minutes. For example, if we set up a rendezvous point for dire situations or something, I just have to hide out there until Oishi-san arrived.
よし。少し見えてきたぞ。
I was still being chased around in the dark by boogeymen, but now I knew which ways to go. I never would have imagined this would be so reassuring. Oh yeah. It'd probably be best if I had a concealed weapon for when things got rough. Typically, that would call for a switchblade. But that wasn't too reassuring for combat. Also, since it was recognized as a weapon by the public, that also wasn't good. Really, when the time comes, a long weapon, like a bat, would work in my favor. I remembered there was a metal bat at school. I could be confident with that when push came to shove. If I pretended I was practicing my swing, then it wouldn't be suspicious for me to always carry it around. I could go to school early tomorrow and secure it. Just possessing a weapon may be enough to deter them. Also, one more thing. Insurance. It could be something like a note or memo. I could write down everything that's happened as a sort of journal. In case I suddenly vanished, the journal would be left behind. With my journal in his possession, Oishi-san should be able to avenge my death. I left my parents engrossed in their conversation about work and went back to my room. I tore out a piece of paper from a notebook and made my way to my desk. Last time I wrote a journal was for summer homework in elementary school. In the off chance something bad happened, police could use my diary as a lead. So I should only write down the facts. How should I start? I jotted down my thoughts as they came. I, Keiichi Maebara, am in fear for my life. It made me laugh nervously. It was a line that showed up often in detective stories. I never even dreamed that I would be in the type of situation where I'd write it myself. I do not know why they are after my life. None of the others were suspicious, but I had no proof. And that's why I couldn't write anything more. I laughed wryly at myself for writing such a passage draped in mystery. Would the police be able to get the hint from reading this enigmatic passage? I could only pray that they would. What I prayed for the most, though, was that this journal never needed to play its part. Here, I laughed nervously. It was too simple, so I wrote down one more line I just thought of. The only thing I do know is that it has to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. Was that too much? I probably shouldn't write more than that. If I wrote any more, then it would seem like I was just delusional. In order to appear to the reader that the person who had written this was of sound mind, I chose not to write anything else at that point. I just needed to add more as I learned more about the truth. I folded the paper and thought about a place to hide it. By hiding it somewhere obvious, there was the chance that they would uncover it instead. On the other hand, If it was in too obscure of a location, then there was the risk of nobody finding it at all. In the end, I decided to take the clock off my wall and stick my folded note on the back of it with Scotch tape. After that, I put the clock back into its normal position. Yeah, it didn't look like anything was hidden behind it. Now I needed to set it up such that if anything happens to me, my parents could find it. I looked at it from countless angles until I was satisfied and made my way downstairs. Okay, hang on, I think I'm gonna go use the restroom really quickly, so BRB. Where is it? Here. Yeah. Well, I'm back, but hang on, something. Phone is being a little weird. Hang on, let me just mute the audio for a second. The computer audio. Ah, okay. Nice. Okay, and here we go. Okay, my parents were still talking about work. It didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon, so I cut in.
話中ごめん。ちょっと聞いてもらっていいかな。
I'd never started off a conversation like that before, so my parents were both startled. They stopped talking and turned towards
どう
me.
したのケイチ？
お願いがあるんだけど、聞いてほしいんだ。もしもだよ。
ケイチ、急ぎの話じゃなきゃ後にしなさい。お父さんとお母さんはちょっと今、急ぎの話をしてるんだ。
I didn't think their talk was more urgent than mine. In any case, I stated my request.
もしもだよ。俺が死んだらさ。
Both my parents' eyes went as wide as saucers.
死んだらさ、俺の部屋にある時計、あれを棺に入れてほしいんだ。
If they did that, then they'd probably find it. My memoir. Both my parents remained wide-eyed, not moving an inch. I couldn't
あ
blame
の時
them.
計、工作の授業で作ったお気に入りなんだ。頼むよ。
どうしたのケイチ？何かあったの？
Mom was finally able to ask me with a questioning gaze. Of course, this was a normal response for when somebody's sons suddenly talked about a subject like this. I felt bad about making them worry, but right now I just wanted them to think about the clock in my room. With the awkward mood leaving the room in silence, I decided to go back up to my
俺
room.
さ、明日は早くに学校に行きたいから、もう寝るよ。おやすみ。
Saying only that, I left the living room. I needed to get to school early tomorrow and secure that bat. I should make today the last day I went to school with Rena. As I climbed the stairs, I heard my mom call my name, but I pretended not to hear her. It wasn't something I could talk about with my parents. If I talked about it, it would only make things more dangerous. The fight that had begun was mine, and mine alone. I couldn't rely on anybody. I wouldn't be killed. Not when I still knew nothing. Well. Okay, not feeling so hot. Tip. Let's see.
最近圭一くんの元気がないね。機嫌が悪いのかな。
さーてどうしたんだろうね。恋の
みーちゃん、それ早くしすぎ。
Oopsie. Oh, maybe he's on his period.
どう思う？
さあね。ケイちゃんひょっとしてかな。
わかんない。
Oh, yeah.
あの日ケイちゃんと車で話してたの中年のでっぷりした男だったんでしょ。
うん、間違いない。
大石のやつケイちゃんに何を吹き込んでるのかな。
真剣そうだったよ。圭一くんは顔面蒼白だった。
あのね、レナはよく知らないだろうけど、実はあいつお社様の使いなんだよ。
Eh?
何の話？
あいつが現れるとね、必ず鬼隠しが起こるの。本当だよ。
あれ？そうなの？
おととしリカちゃんのお母さんが受水したでしょ。 その直前に大石が尋問してたんだよ。
そういえば、サトシ君が転校する前にもいたね。
転校レナはいいやつだよな。
Oh yeah.
で、今度はケイチ君の前に現れたんだ。じゃあ、ケイチ君も鬼隠しになっちゃう？
An empty silence hung in the air, and then it was suddenly interrupted. By loud laughter. Oh yeah. Them laughing together. Kinda ominous. Ugh. Safe. Alrighty, well, this will be the end for today. I think next time, I was looking into it and there's like 12 chapters in this game, at least, this first one. So yeah, I'll probably try to do the last two in the next stream and then just like finish off this one. So I heard the last chapter is a bit longer than the rest, so I guess, yeah. Instead of 2 hours like most of these have been, I guess it'll be a bit longer. Maybe, well, I really don't know. But yeah, so I'll be looking forward to it. And there's like a lot of other higurashi games continuing after this too, so I'll probably just be continuing to play it. Yeah, curious to see what happens next, but this will be the end of this stream today. Yeah. Bye bye! See you! Thanks for coming.